All right, next up, we have a headline from the Daily Wire written on June 3rd, 2021. It says this: top cybersecurity official has bad news about ransomware attacks that have seemingly worsened under Biden. So, as you may know, I think it was about a month ago or so, there was an issue with a cyber attack on an oil manufacturing company. It affected a lot of the states on the East Coast, and it skyrocketed the prices. It reduced the supply as well. And it looks like major ransomware attacks, I'm just quoting the article here, major ransomware attacks have occurred recently against companies in the oil and gas industry, the insurance industry and transportation industry, and the meat industry. And that was actually kind of the newer one as well. And a top U.S. official is warning that recent major ransomware attacks against the U.S. under President Biden are likely to continue as the attacker has become more brazen. And frankly, this is what happens when you have weak leadership. As we have competing nations around the world, their goal is to fulfill their own self-interest. And how they do that is that they can hit on the economic structure, infrastructure that can impact a nation like the United States. And if they can put a big enough dent in the infrastructure in the United States, economically, it can improve their position economically and globally as well. So even though it's not technically a war, it's really a digital war, what we're seeing right now against, they're assuming this is coming from, it says again, believed to be from Russia, which has infiltrated more than 250 federal agencies as well. And so I suppose that is something that we're always going to battle, especially in our technological age of the internet. And most of these companies, as you probably know, they rely heavily on technology to make their operations work. And so the biggest issue about this, though, is the response from the White House and Joe Biden, and specifically from his press secretary, Jen Psaki. So Jen Psaki was questioned by a Fox News reporter, and this is another Daily Wire headline. It says Psaki mocks reporter who asked why Russian ransomware attacks are increasing under Biden. So it's a second story kind of continuation of the increase of ransomware under Joe Biden's watch. And so this reporter is Peter Ducey. You probably have seen him. It says this: the question from Fox News reporter Peter Ducey came after hackers believed to be from Russia have launched attacks on oil and meat companies, disrupting supply chains in the U.S. So we have a quote from Ducey on the GBS attack. These hackers based in Russia have disrupted American gas supplies and American meat supplies. Why do you think that these ransomware attacks have been rising since President Biden took office? So Psaki responded, well, first I will say these are private sector entities who have a responsibility to place measures to protect their own cybersecurity. As it relates to why criminal actors are taking action against private sector entities, I don't think I'm the right one to speak to that. And then Ducey replied with, so you think it's totally coincidental? And this is really where Jen Psaki should put her foot in her mouth, because it was not empathetic. And I'll provide a bit of commentary once I say this. Quote Psaki here. So Psaki replied with, I think you could certainly go track down those cyber criminals in Russia and have a good chat with them. So here's the thing. Yes, these are private entities, private U.S. entities, private sector entities, private businesses. And let's not confuse with the idea of we need government to completely stay out of the private sector. I mean, the government in this case, the Biden administration, wants to get involved in every aspect of education, of the workplace, pushing critical race theory, intersectionality, making sure that it's in the military and in the media. It's everywhere. They are everywhere. They have their hands in almost every institution in this country. And when institutions, in this case, private institutions, oil, gas, meat companies, so on and so forth, when they are being affected negatively by another country maybe not Russia specifically as like the Russian the country of Russia, but there's entities within Russia that are doing this. Um, Russia really needs to crack down on what's going on within their population. And so there are methods in which the US can get involved by administrating sanctions to help put a little bit of pressure on Russia so that they crack down on their own population so that they can get these criminals and put them behind bars and control that. And so that can be done through an economic sanction process. But for Psaki just to say, oh, it's a private sector entity and we shouldn't get involved, it's 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 more involved than how she's describing it because at the end of the day, it affects you and me. It affects you and me as we won't be able to fill our gas tank up to go to work. It affects you and me because we can't put food on the table because they're affecting the operation supply chain with these entities, though they're private, they are really baked into the ecosystem of the US. So, anyways, it's just one of those things where it's ironic where this particular administration wants their hands in everything. They want to control what you say, what you don't say, how you think, where you should go to school, supporting abortion, all the things that a typical conservative would generally be against. They want their hands involved in those things, but when it comes to these instances in which these Russian criminals are affecting many aspects of the U.S. citizens, and again, this is going to increase prices for likely meat and oil, gas, and if it's transportation and insurance and things like that, it's going to affect us as citizens. So the White House and the U.S. government should be moving forward in measures to protect our interests and the people's interests, your interests, my interests. So, anyways, that's an interesting take from
We
Pasaki
have
there.
another headline from Fox News. It says Virginia parents speaking out against critical race theory face retaliation. Fight over critical race theory pits neighbor against neighbor in affluent DC area school district. So, as you know, there's a lot of issues going on, not just with the ideology of critical race theory, and really what it is, critical race theory derives from critical theory, which critical theory, its roots are Marxist, and critical theory is a school of thought primarily instituted by the Frankfurt School, excuse me. And if you know anything about Marxism, it really is designed to, it's godless, it's unequal as it relates to pinning people against other people, as what you're seeing. Karl Marx described the battle between the proletariats and the bourgeois, and that was that line of thinking. So is the working class versus the capitalists, and try to, in short, institute a revolution so that the proletariats could take over the capitalists and there'd be a peace in the world, so on and so forth. But now, because America is generally wealthy, and even the poorest of our society, comparatively speaking, to folks around the world are very wealthy. Um, and they have a lot of institutional support through government programs, food stamps, and stipends through the government, etc. What we see now with critical race theory is that because we don't really have a economic class issue where it's the poor versus the rich, we have the race issue, black versus white, and now Stop Asian Hate. And that's really what critical race theory is. It's kind of molded from Marxist ideology to pin people against each other. And essentially, what happens, communists who want to institute their utopian country, utopian land free of borders. Everyone is not, they don't get equal treatment because if you work hard and someone else doesn't, it doesn't matter if you work harder than the person next to you. They focus on equal outcome. So regardless of how hard you work, you could
be tirelessly working 80 hours a week, and if someone else only works 10 hours, your outcomes will be equal. Your income will be equal. The things that you have available to you will be equal. So it's very opposite to the American philosophy on, the pursuit of happiness and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the capitalistic mindset of the free market and you pursuing your American dream. And obviously, that can be that can lead to selfishness and greed and things like that. So we always need to be kept in check. But I find that capitalistic mentality and capitalism provide more freedom for people and more freedom to choose, more freedom to be who they want to be, pursue what they want to pursue, make money, however much money they want to make based on their preference and their lifestyle and goals. Communism does not do that, and Marxism supports and tries to institute communism. And critical theory, and critical race theory specifically trying to pin people against people. And one of the things is, you know, as you probably have heard throughout the news, um, if you are a minority, and we'll just use if you're a black man, you are a victim. If you are a white man, you are an oppressor, and there's no way of getting out of that. There's no redemption, there's no forgiveness. It is just who you are. It is the most unbiblical view someone could have. And unfortunately, I've actually spoke with many Christians who take this mindset, and this lens becomes their lens. They don't view the world through the biblical lens where we are all sinners. We are all, consider us all oppressors to one degree or another. And we all need forgiveness because we are under God's judgment, and He will provide forgiveness through Jesus Christ. But when people, especially Christians, when critical race theory becomes their gospel, they view everybody from a race perspective. They look at you and believe that your identifying trait, your number one identifying trait is the color of your skin, no matter where you came from. You could be a black man or a black family, raised, growing up in a great community, great suburb, or great inner city, urban area, whatever the case may be, and be perhaps even be successful, but you will always be considered a victim in society. And that's not fair to you. And it's not fair for, the stereotype of a white family or a white male being an oppressor, and there's no way out of it. There's no redemption for it. But we need to continue to speak up and out against critical race theory because it is going through schools. It is being taught in public schools. There's no proof for it. There's no data that supports it. And it is, in other words, it is essentially when there's no data and there's no support for it, it's a theory. It's essentially a religion. It's a worldview. And so you could argue, well, if this is being taught in schools, critical race theory, well, how come we're not teaching the Bible in schools? There's more evidence of biblical truths than there are of critical race theory. So it's something that we need to get involved in as parents. I have 4 kids myself, and have actually had some conversations with teachers. So make sure you go to those school committee meetings. If there's options for your children to go to do homeschooling or to even go to charter schools, we need to leverage the freedom of our society to put a little pressure on the schools. Because if we basically suck the supply line, the bloodline out of the public schools, they won't get funding, they'll shut down, and we'll have other options. So, but we do need to stand up, we do need to speak out, and this is an interesting story with this one lady. And then the last headline that we have today to talk about is city workers tear down barricades at George Floyd Autonomous Zone. So this is from the Washington Examiner, and it looks like, if you do not know, the square, if you will, George Floyd Square, they began to call it, which is where we saw that horrific video of the George Floyd dying, being in police custody. It is an autonomous zone, and you probably have seen that video floating around. I think it was either maybe earlier this week or last week yeah, on the 25th. It was, I think it was a CNN reporter, one of the mainstream outlets, just doing talking about the anniversary of George Floyd dying, etc. And there was a shooting on live TV, and so it was scary to see that. And but it's quite interesting where it looks like the crime rate in the George Floyd Square has absolutely skyrocketed. It increased by 1,000 more crimes in the last year. And the police are not allowed to be there. They've made it an autonomous zone. Basically, it's like a little section of Minneapolis where people can't really call for help from the police. So the city workers have removed the barriers from the cop-free zone, and it looks like at around 4:30 a.m., crews donning construction gear removed barricades, makeshift housing, and artwork at the cop-free zone, as this article quotes, area that encompasses the Cup food store where when Floyd was killed on May 25th, 2020. So sad again, that whole situation is really sad. But we need the law enforcement. If we believe that defunding the police will resolve anything, it really won't. It only hurts the minority communities who actually need them the most. And my daughter, she's been watching one of the live PD shows, I believe. Uh, uh, Night Watch, I think it's called Night Watch. And so she's seeing, these live interactions with emergency personnel, police officers, EMTs, paramedics, firefighters, etc. And she's getting almost like a better picture of what these emergency employees, public servants go through, who they interact with, how they interact, how the population, how the citizens interact with the police, with the EMTs, etc. And she's almost getting a better picture of what news should really be like versus exploiting black men deaths by police. And so I just found that interesting. So anyways, keep up the good work. Thank you for watching and look out for a new video soon. Take care. God bless.